But I just want to start off by thanking Brandon Lee, who brought Joe and Whitney out here for his podcast. The talks from the Cribs, without Brandon Lee, none of this would have happened, so be sure to follow them wherever you stream your podcasts. I also want to thank Patrick Hughes, who came to me immediately. Patrick has a publishing Pluto Press. And he's like, hey, do you know who Joe Coleman is? You want to host a book signing? I was like, do I know who Joe Coleman is? What? And then this is apparently only one of 2 events you're doing. One in LA and here on the West Coast.
There's 2 in LA.
2 in LA, okay. Yeah. We'll call it 1 since we're in different states. So thank you all. And everybody coming out tonight, we really appreciate it. I mean, obviously, Joe's got a huge fan base. So I want to thank everybody for making it out tonight. I want to start off by, also thanking Whitney, who's been a big part of Joe's life here and has done so much to apparently make Joe even a nicer guy. If you ever look into Joe's stuff, he's a nice guy. You look at his art, you're like, who is this psycho? But apparently he's one of the nicest guys in the world. And so not only is that awesome, but thank you, Whitney, for coming on out and showing us your So, Joe, you produced some of my all-time favorite quotes, one being, the culture gets the criminals it deserves. I thought that was just brilliant. I love the quote that, another one was something along the lines of, normal people are distorted on the inside and freaks are distorted on the outside, which I think that is another one that's just phenomenal. Now, you've done sideshow barking on Coney Island, but you've also done a plethora of art forms most of your life. My question is, what came first? Your punk band, your performance art, where you blew your shit up and ate and decapitated mice as a performer mambuzo, your paintings, or acting? Because you've done all of these things. How did it all begin?
Painting was always my first love, and I'm not sure who in the audience knows this, but my first collector was Lady Bird Johnson. Lyndon Baines Johnson's wife. Who was a American president that had to take office after Kennedy was assassinated, JFK, and JFK was assassinated on my birthday. Not the day I was born, but it was the it was November 22nd in was it 60?
That was one of the things I was going to ask you about.
Yeah. So, I was born in November 22nd, 1955. So that was a celebration of my birthday, in 1963. And the present I was given was a man from Uncle sniper rifle. In which, it starts out with a pistol, but you add, shoulder stock and silencer and scope to it, so you can, kill people from far away, like Oswald. And so it was very appropriate and inappropriate, which I think I seem to be in those places way too many times. And trying to get back to your question, the first artwork that I ever made was, when I was really little. Even before that, my mother, I was raised Irish Catholic. Patrick, you and I, talked about that before, because in my mind, the Irish Catholic has a kind of Celtic, pagan side of the Christian view, so it's kind of darker and more into bloodshed, and because I was this little kid in church, and I'm looking at the Stations of the Cross in this church that I was really bored in. You know, I'm just this little kid, and my mom saw that I was bored, so she eventually, you know, bought me a sketchbook and crayons and a pencil and put them in, and gave them to me, and I just looked around and I saw this guy being tortured, you know, and mutilated, and I started drawing that with the pencil, and I only used one crayon because I did all the drawing part of it with the pencil, and then I didn't think that any of my crayons were necessary except the red crayon, and I used the red crayon for blood. and I still have some of those exist, you know, today, and they've been published. Before I gave one to Whitney, but then later, you know, I got fascinated by garbage, and when I was in the 3rd grade in Miss Ryder's class, she just really liked my painting of garbage, and she put it in this children's art show that was in City Hall in my hometown in Norwalk, Connecticut. And Lady Bird Johnson was traveling around America doing this anti-litter campaign, and all of a sudden, because she collected children's art, and she thought that my painting of garbage was a great indictment against litter. And so she bought it for her children's art collection. And that was my first collector, Lady Bird Johnson, when I was in Miss Ryder's class in 4th grade. So it was always, you know, painting that I was most compelled by. The you know, the performance stuff came later, and mostly inspired by my mother, who really wanted to be an actress. She ended up, you know, saddled with a bunch of kids. I mean, my mother was so beautiful. Like when you know, when I was getting out of like elementary school, you know, and she was picking me up, she, you know, she was so glamorous that the kids are going, "Oh my God, that's your mom!" And it's just in a small town, and she was always kind of over the top, dramatic, and so my performances mostly come from her, and my kind of ambivalent relationship to Catholicism, which she spoon-fed me. You know, she was also, you know, really bought the whole idea, you know, that she was going to burn in hell for eternity because she married my father, because she had been married previously. And back then in the Catholic Church, that was like a cardinal sin, and you couldn't remarry, you know, and it really hurt her, you know, and kind of, you know, it made me angry at the Catholic Church when I finally realized, you know, that's why she wouldn't take Holy Communion, that she forced me to take, you know. So I had to eat the body and blood of Jesus, which was kind of cool. You know, in this little wafer that's in wine, that is actually supposed to be his blood, and you're eating his flesh, which is this like little, you know, wafer, and that's what influenced my performances. But the beginning is really, even when from childhood, it was about the painting elements. But I mean, they all started in infancy, you could say.
Well, speaking of infancy, you were bullied as a young kid, and you apparently lived across the street from a cemetery, and those were your real friends, the dead folks. That's who you would go and hang out with?
Yeah, and you know, I lived at number 99 Ward Street. It's a double number, and I was also born in 11/22/55. So those are all double numbers. So those doubles are really important to me throughout my entire life. And the house that was across the street from the cemetery was at number 99 Ward Street, and that's my sweetheart's last name is Ward. And think about it, Whitney Ward. That's a double W. I mean, just to say it, it feels like, I don't know, some kind of like incantation that you shouldn't say unless you're serious. And so, yeah, I mean, where am I going with this?
Well, let's talk about how you like to fuck with people. You were talking to Jim Jarmusch about a confessional that you made about murdering people. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, as I was saying just like a minute ago, really, you know, I got really angry at the Catholic Church. You know, at first I was a good Catholic boy, you know, and altar boy, and then when I started to realize the hypocrisy, you know, of the religion, you know, that I was being spoon-fed, it started to get me more and more angry. And I just want to, okay, you want to fuck with me? I'll fuck you, too. So I'm, you know, in the confessional when I first started going there, you know, bless me, Father, for I have sinned, and you know, and I confessed like things that I was ashamed of that I did. And then I was saying, I submitted myself to that hypocrisy for all these childhood years. I mean, it wasn't a lot because I was barely even entering the world, but nevertheless, I was fucking angry. And I was like, you did that to me? You made me confess my sins to your hypocrisy and your bullshit? Oh man, I was like, okay, I'll do the same for you. So you know, I'm waiting in line, you know, and I hear these other people's, you know, confessing their sins, you know, and then getting the blessing, you know, from the priest. And I did know the priest that I went in there, and there had been these murders committed in my town. I said, bless me, Father, if I've sinned. I'm really ashamed. Oh my God, I'm so ashamed. I killed her. And I call my knife Johnny. And Johnny felt good when he got in that soft flesh, you know, and pulled out, you know, the life's essence of blood. I could feel it. I could feel it. I could taste it. And the priest is like freaking out. And he gets out of his little, you know, box that he's in, and he starts screaming at me. And everyone, you know, that's waiting in line to do their confession is also freaking out. And that was actually the first of my performance. I don't know, performance art? I don't know if it's art. It's okay, performance pathology that I did.
Yeah. You were also in a punk band, and you've been in a bunch of movies. In fact, you played Harvey Weinstein before anybody knew
Right.
how much of a horrible piece of shit he was, and
Yeah.
you played that to a T. So tell us a little bit about that and some of the highlights from that.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty crazy story. I mean, I had always loved Dario Argento. I mean, probably all of you know Dario, and I loved his work. But then I was contacted by Asia Argento, and I didn't really know who she was at first. And she was kind of obsessed with my work, and I didn't know who she was. And then she explained that she was the daughter of Dario, and then I realized, yeah, I've seen her in all of Dario's movies, and she came to America and was trying to convince me to do this this film that we never actually made, which was, she wanted me to play this kind of Dr. Moreau-like character in Atlantis that was doing experiments on mutation, and she still wants to make that film. I mean, because I think she's a great director too, and I would love it if we finally do make that film. But that film didn't happen. But she made this film called Scarlet Diva, and Scarlet Diva is an autobiographical, very courageous autobiographical film that she made about her life, you know, up until that time. And she was, you know, very young. And, you know, she was, you know, one of the actual first women that came out to talk about the fact that she was raped by Harvey Weinstein. You know, she's one of the beginning, you know, the beginning of the Me Too movement. She was there in Italy, like starting that, and she put it all on film in 2000. Harvey Weinstein was convicted, you know, of sexual assault and rape 20 years later in 2020. So this is before anyone would do it. And at first, she asked Marlon Brando, who was an old man at the time, to play Harvey Weinstein in the movie, and Brando said no. This is all stuff that she told me, and then she said, "Joe, Brando said no. What do you think?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm in." And but the thing is, you know, she and I really got each other, and it's a great honor and gift. You know, to the universe, that she felt comfortable. Like, I'm not a trained actor, you know. I was so scared, you know, before I went on, but she trusted me to play out this really horrible psychodrama that happened to her, and she felt that kind of trust in me, because we both really just got each other, and so, but I added humor to the character that Harvey did not have. You know, I was calling her my little moo-moo snatch, and she would crack up, it made her like a little bit easier with trying to deal with the material. But it was this, you know, a shocking, intense film, you know, and you know, so I guess, you know, I'm a footnote in film history. But when I was on set, you know, Ozzy had given me, you know, the screenplay, and all this dialogue that she wrote that probably Harvey really said. And I was reading, you know, this dialogue, and I just didn't feel comfortable with the dialogue that was written. And then I show up in Italy, in Rome, at the Hilton Hotel, where she's got all the crew, and Dario, one of my heroes of, you know, the great horror films, like Deep Red and Suspiria. And he's on the set watching, and I have to rape, his daughter, and it's scary, and so I'm trying to, like, before I have to go on set, I say to Azia, come on, come here, look. I read all of this dialogue that you wrote, and I know Harvey said that, but he's not called Harvey Weinstein in the movie. He's called Mr. Parr. But we all knew because we all talked about it, and I said, I can't read this dialogue. Do you mind if I make it up as I go on? And then she looks me in the eye, and there's all these cameras and lights waiting to go, and she just says, Joe, that's why you're here. Go. Do it. And then I had fun, and then I chased her buck naked except for my cowboy boots at the Rome Hilton. And then there was people that were coming out of their doors, and I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? And they were just innocent people, but they were all in the shot. And so it's like, like this scream, and chased her, and she runs to the elevator door. I don't know how many people have seen the movie, but it's a courageous movie, and I'm really proud of Azia and honored, that she wanted me to do it. So
Yeah. And apparently the cameraman just laughed their ass off afterwards, chasing him, because it was not a scene that was already like run through.
Oh, we made it up.
Yeah, and so they're running behind his ass, running down the
My
hallway,
naked
laughing
ass.
their ass. They were in the corners apparently, just like, oh my god! But you had also done, like, nobody really had seen Harvey Weinstein in action, and you did the whole, how about you give me a massage, and hey, where you going, come back here, and it really said, like, you hear these stories from everybody who's had to deal with Harvey Weinstein. That's all after the fact that you had portrayed something that somebody had gone through, and you did such an amazing job. I mean, that was admirable in your own, and that you put a little slapstick to it, made it fun too. It lightened the mood of that. I'm sure that was really hard for her.
yeah.
I'm gonna do one more of these and then bring Jacob up. And the one I want to do is, can you tell us all about fish fucking Satanists?
All right. In the 1980s, I was doing these performances where I bit the heads off live animals and blew myself up on stage. And I got arrested for almost every single performance that I did. And one of them I did in the abandoned piers on the West Side Highway. And I got this dog from the Carolina Biological Supply Company that was, preserved and in formaldehyde, but skinned, and I hung that up to the entrance of this pier on the West Side Highway, and I put this Carmen Ghia that I had on cinder blocks and lit the pier just with the headlights of the car, and had my explosives on. And I got a fish, a carp, really big one, that I stuck in the fly of my pants that was sticking out. And I was, about to do this performance. Manuel Delanda was shooting it. And my wife at the time, Nancy Piver, was there. And Manuel and her were like shooting stuff, and I was about to perform, but I hadn't even got to the performance yet. But all the New York City cops surrounded the pier because they thought it was a kid. There was a report of this body, of a human body, of a child that was hanging.
Skinned human child.
And the pier I chose because it had these satanic symbols all over it. So the cops were like totally freaked out, and they surrounded the pier, and they, you know, told us to come out with our hands up. And so Nancy ran out, and she's trying to explain to the cops that it's art and stuff, and the cops are going, "Get out of the way, get the fuck out of the way." And they're waiting for me. Then Manuel came out with his camera, and he's trying to film it, and then they grab his camera and they take it away from him. And then I come out and I have all these explosives on it. Plus I have the fish hanging out of the fly in my pants. And so they all have their guns on me. And, you know, I just have my hands up because that's all I can do. And then this cop that's really close to me, while I have my hands up, starts unbuttoning my shirt because he sees this weird, you know, protruding thing sticking out of my shirt, and he opens it and he sees there's fuses, you know, because I have my explosives.
Firecrackers, right?
Yeah, M80s and cherry bombs and attached to a cookie sheet. So it's really primitive. It's primitive pyrotechnics. And but the cops are like, they start, you know, this one guy unbuttons my shirt. He's like, "Holy shit, what are you gonna do with that?" And I have my hands up. I said, "Have you got a light, buddy?" He said, "Put the handcuffs on that motherfucker right now." So then they put the handcuffs on me, and they handcuff Manuel, who's shooting it, and my wife at the time, Nancy, and they put her with the dead dog, you know, that smells like formaldehyde. And so the cops start arguing with each other, and they said, "Don't put the fish fucker in here. We already got this dead dog. You put the fish fucker in your cop car, man. Yeah, just keep the fish fucker out of here, man. I don't have to deal with the fish fucker." And so like I'm being pushed around. And so we get to the Port Authority precinct, and that's where they put me in a cell with Manuel Delanda. And my wife is put in the women's cell. But the cops are then doing a whole investigation, you know, to see if I really fucked the fish. So they had the rubber glove in the fish's mouth, and then they had it under the microscope to see if there was any semen on it. And then they're all like arguing, you know, about what they're going to charge me with. And there have been murders committed on the West Side Highway, and they try to charge, it's a fish fucker, he must have died. And then finally, like in the middle of the night, you know, these, you know, hookers that were in 42nd Street, right near the precinct, get arrested, and they go in Nancy's cell, and Nancy doesn't really kind of belong there. She doesn't seem kind of right, and so they're going, why are you here? And she says, "I'm with the guy in the next cell." "Holy shit, you're with the fish fucker?" "Oh my God, what's it like being with the fish fucker?" And so everyone had known about it, like the whole West Side Highway was reeling with, they caught the fish fucker. And so then finally the DA shows up in the early morning, you know, and he finally gets there. I think it's like, you know, 8 or 9 o'clock. You know, we've been there all night. And I'm with the DA, and I'm talking about Dada and surrealism, and the DA's like, "Yeah, I don't see any crime really here. What's going on?" It's so you know, so we're at the release desk, and we're about to leave, but they took Polaroid pictures of all the evidence, you know, the dog and the explosives and all this other crazy stuff that I set up in the pier. And we're about to leave, and then this new cop comes in, this cop with a lot of attitude, and we're about to leave, and he sees the Polaroid pictures. He starts looking at them. He sees the fish. He's like, what the fuck? Then he sees like the explosives, and he's like, holy shit, did you get the motherfucker that did that? And then there's a cop that's been there the whole time. And he's like leaning on the desk. And he just goes, don't you know what that is? That's surrealism.
So that's just the surface of Joe Coleman. But I'm gonna bring up Jacob Giger right now. He's the one who introduced me to Joe Coleman in 1990. He's been a collector, a fan. My questions were great. Jacob's are gonna be a lot better. So come on up, Jacob.
No pressure.
Turn the mic off.
You turned it off?
Yeah.
Hey, Jacob. Hey, long time. Let's see if I can figure out how to turn this on. Where do you turn it? Okay, the button.
There you go.
So basically, I wanted to kind of dive into the 70s.
Is it on?
Pull
No.
out your mouth.
Oh,
there you
go. Oh, sorry, I'm not really a public speaker, if you can't tell. But anyhow, yeah, I know you were a cab driver and everything, and so you got to see the seedy underbelly of New York City, and it was different times, like Times Square was kind of a red light district, and so I was kind of curious about the influences. I know your artwork was quite a bit darker back then, so I can only imagine the things that you saw, so I just kind of wanted to know like the influences and some experiences, and yeah, just New York in the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, I was, a taxi driver during the Travis Bickle era, but the stuff that was in Scorsese's movie was pretty tame compared to the stuff that I saw. And I worked for a company that was in Hell's Kitchen, pretty close to Times Square, and it was called Kafka Management, and the owner manager's name was Gregor Samsa. And I'm not bullshitting you, man. That was real. So there was some, a certain amount of, knowledge of the fact that it's, reference to literature. I never met the guy, but I thought it was really cool that he did that he named it, Kafka Management, with Gregor Samsa as the owner manager. But that's the company I worked for, and I drove the graveyard shift, we used to call it. Maybe they still call it that these days, but it was from 6 in the night till 6 in the morning, and it's like I'm sure all kinds of crazy shit happened during the day, but the stuff at night I thought was even maybe a little bit more real. But I was kind of not the best taxi driver myself. I mean, I was problematic back then, and if somebody didn't have the fare, I started out by taking their wallet, but I realized they didn't do anything, and so then eventually I decided I'm going to take their shoes. You know, and then New York City was fucking cold, you know, and they had just like broken glass on the streets. So I wanted them to have something to remember the fact that they didn't have the fare to pay me. So I would take their shoes. So I had a shoe collection. And when I met Nancy, she saw this shoe collection and she thought, oh my God, he is a serial killer. There's all these trophies, and it was like, but no, it's just the people that wouldn't pay, you know, I'd take their shoes. 'Cause that's the only way they would remember, you know, because, you know, some of the worst things that would happen in a taxi, you know, are, yeah, okay, you know, the worst thing is when somebody pukes in your cab, because then you got to clean it up too. I mean, it's disgusting, and then they don't even have any money, you know, and it's pretty awful. I remember there was this one time when I was driving, because I drove a cab for, that was the only profession that I was qualified to do before becoming an artist. And there's this time that I was, you know, driving in Connecticut, and I, you know, picked up this guy at Donovan's Shanty, and it was where my father used to get wasted all the time. And I knew it was kind of bad because when I picked him up, there was a bunch of people carrying him out of the barn, and they just shoved him in the back. And so, you know, I turned around and said, so where you going? And so I look at him and hey, what? And I said, what did you say? And I said, okay. I turned the meter on, and I just start driving, you know, and I wander around. And as I'm driving, I'm thinking, I know where to take this guy. And so, in Connecticut, where I was driving then, there was a place under Route 95 that had the incinerator, the city dump on one side, and this graveyard on the other side, and it's underneath 95, but it's really hard to get to. And so I drove there. It took me a while to get there. I had the meter running the whole time. And so when we get there, you know, it's in the middle of the night too, and you know, I'm waking him up. I said, okay, you're here. I was like, all right, you're here. All right. So I realized that I probably wasn't going to be paid, so I helped get his wallet out, and I only took the fare, what the fare was, and then I put the wallet back in his pocket. Then he gets out of the taxi and he just starts wandering around. And he's like, what the fuck? Where'd you take me? And I said, the city dump. And that's where I take all the trash. Don't ever get in my cab again, you motherfucker. But it didn't end there. Like a couple of weeks later, a bunch of us cab drivers were hanging out at the family diner, which was the only 24-hour diner in this town. And you know, we often meet, you know, and exchange stories. And also my Steel Tips record I put on the jukebox at the family diner from my old band back then in the 70s. And so I'm hanging out at the family diner, and this buddy of mine shows up, you know, and I think maybe we just normally start talking about things we experience, because we experience some crazy things. And he starts saying, Joe, this weird thing, I picked up this guy at the family diner. At Donovan's Shanty. I picked up this guy at Donovan's Shanty, and the first thing he did when he got in the car was he starts yelling at me. And he says, you motherfucker, don't take me to the city dump. Every time you taxi drivers pick me up, you always take me to the city dump, you motherfuckers. Don't ever do that. It's like, there's something like really kind of sweet about it.
All right, we'll continue on with the New York theme a little bit. How about your experiences? When did you meet Jonathan Shaw and Fun City Tattoo? And then also I was kind of curious about the underground comic scene, because I know there really wasn't an underground art scene at the time, so it was mainly comics. So,
well, I guess I should start with Jonathan, I don't know if there's probably a lot of people that know who Jonathan Shaw is, but he's a, kind of, at this point, world-renowned, tattoo artist. And, but back then, tattooing was illegal in New York City, and, that's when I got my tattoos from Jonathan, back when it was illegal, in his place called The Crypt. Jonathan's family. Jonathan's, a dear friend of mine, and his family. And, it was interesting because he wrote one of the chapters in the new book about my influence on tattooing, and that I had no knowledge of, because he convinced me to do some tattoo flash, which I did back years ago when it was illegal, and but yeah, he's a really special friend to me, and a supporter of my work. But if you want to know the first time we met, that was in LA, and I'm doing some events in LA coming up, but I was doing this performance at I'm trying to think of his name, but it's Leo DiCaprio's father, George. George. So yes, and George hired me to. It's a mistake to hire me to do a performance. So George hired me to do a performance at his space back then in LA, and immediately the cops got wind of the fact that I was going to do a performance there. So there was helicopters and cops are waiting all over, and they didn't know exactly what I looked like back then, so I kind of snuck out, but I told everyone we're going to do the show at Venice Beach, so meet me at Venice Beach in a couple of hours. But I would do it secretly to people, tell a couple of people I would see, and so then I escaped the helicopters and the cops, and Adam Parfrey, my dear friend, drove me to Venice Beach, and then everybody was waiting there in their cars, and it was kind of cool because I told them to all light their headlights and light this lifeguard station, so they all surrounded on the beach this lifeguard station, and they turned their headlights on. And I climbed to the top of the lifeguard station, and I did my performance there, where I bit the heads off live animals and, exploded myself and did my preacher, because it was a dark preacher called Professor Mambuzu. And then I put out the explosives by diving into the ocean because I was on fire, and then I dived into the ocean, and I jettisoned my cane. I had this sword cane with a head at the top of it, of what you would look like if you were stabbed by it, and you could turn it around and see different versions of dying. But I jettisoned it to put myself out, and Jonathan grabbed it. I'd never met him before. I didn't even know who he was. And then I come out of the ocean and I'm drenched, and the fire's gone, and I've come out of my trance state because I kind of like got possessed when I was doing those old performances. And Jonathan comes up and says, "Mr. Coleman, I have your cane." and it was like, thank you. But then he, because I had a show at La Luz de Jesus at that time, and he bought, I think, 2 paintings at that time when they were going for very little money. And Jonathan then, when I returned to New York City where I lived, called me up and said, "Do you remember the guy that gave you your cane? That's me." I said, "Of course I remember you." And he said, "Can I come over?" And of course I said, "Yeah, sure." And he came over, and I don't know, he and I hit it off, really well. And he became a really close friend. Like, he looked out for me when I was going through hard times, and I looked out for him. And he was a real, serious, family member, a person I can trust, with, especially when you're kind of a deviant like myself. It's good to have family you can trust. That's Jonathan. I forget the other question, but
No. I'm kind of overloading you with multiple questions at one time, so I'll probably wrap this up this way. That way you can get some time to sign people's books. But I was kind of curious about like the underground comic scene and the underground art scene there at the beginning when you started out in the 70s, and and some of your influences. I know some of your classical ones, but I was thinking of more modern.
Yeah.
So.
yeah, underground. I was a painter primarily, but there's very few people that could see my paintings. And even when I was doing stuff in the Lower East Side, but I saw like underground comics, that like Zap, that reached a wide audience, and I thought, maybe I should, do these things that can reach a bigger audience, than I was actually reaching at the time. And so I made, I did a couple of underground comics for, a bunch of the traditional publishers, but that wasn't good enough for me. I wanted an epic, so I did this epic called The Mystery of Wolverine Woobait, which was, my graphic novel that I did back then. And I experimented with the page, in which, I filled up every bit of the comic book panel, not just what's inside, but everything outside, and I just bombarded it with information. But if you actually look at The Mystery of Wolverine Woobait, some people have a hard time really getting in there and figuring it out, but it tells a story, and there is there's a narrative. But like with all of my work, it's very dense, and it requires a lot of patience. A lot of art doesn't require patience, and a lot of viewers want to figure everything out the minute they look at it, and if it doesn't do that right away, then they're bored. no, with my work, you really have to take your time and kind of get lost in it. You know, I put so much time, like I barely move my fingers. You know, I have, you know, this one hair brush that I just caress the surface with, and I add more and more information. And I don't figure the whole thing out. I never sketch out, you know, my paintings and or my comics back then. I kind of just continue to cover the surface, and when I run out of room, that's the only way I know I've finished. And then I go to the next page if it's a comic, or the next painting if it's a painting. And the paintings interact with each other, and they do have a continuous narrative. If you look at all the paintings together, as you can in the new book. I hope that answers your question.
Coleman, open it up to Q&A.
Okay, we're going to open it up for Q&A.
Go ahead.
A couple questions, Joe. I'm originally from upstate New York. I know you're into wax museums. Have you ever been to the House of Frankenstein? In
Yeah,
George?
yeah,
Okay.
in
Lake George.
Lake George. Yeah, yeah.
The other question, wondered if you could tell a little story about when you're at School of Visual Arts and the instructors were all into abstract expressionism, and you tell the audience what you painted.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, I briefly attended the School of Visual Arts, but I was butting heads with everybody. And it wasn't abstract expressionism at that time. It was minimalist paintings, which were these, you know, white canvases, and that I was totally bored by. And they're trying to tell me that that's what real art was, and they fucking hated my work, and they couldn't stand it, and they were trying to convince me that I have to, you know, get on board, you know, with what's really happening in the art world. And so, you know, I'm in this classroom, and it's got these stucco walls around, so there's a texture to the walls, you know, that's you know, pretty thick and interesting. But because it's an art studio, it also has paint splatters on it. And so then I just looked at the wall. I set up an easel and a canvas, and I painted the wall exactly the way it was. Exact, down to the texture. I made the paint, the texture of that, and the way the paint splatters existed on, you know, the surface of this stucco wall, all reproduced in paint. And the instructor came over and was like, "Oh my God, Joe, it's so lyrical. You finally get it. I'm so proud of you. This is so great." And I said, "Why? It's just the wall right there." And then she looked at the wall and she said, "I can't do anything with you."
Anybody else?
Yeah, back there.
Zoe.
Yeah, so there's you opened the evening with a mention of heroin being your drug of choice.
Yeah.
And I ask because you brought it up. I don't know if it's a delicate subject or not. But
No subject is
So how much impact did that have on your work? Were drugs important to you in terms of your creativity, or was it just something you were going through?
Well, anything that anything that's in your life affects, you know, the work that you're doing. You know, I'm a very anxious person. You know, that I have you know, so many obsessions that you see in my work. And those obsessions, you know, I see, you know, in my daily life, and they frighten me. And so you know, I tried many drugs, but the only drug that actually calmed my monkey brain that was going crazy all the time was heroin. But it only did that in the beginning. You know, in the beginning, I finally experienced a world in which, you know, all that shit was just silenced. And I finally felt comfortable. And I thought, wow, man, this is awesome. You know, but then, you know, in order to get to that place, I needed more and more heroin that I would shoot up. And eventually it became that I had $100 a day habit back in the 80s, and that was just to get straight, because I wasn't really getting high anymore. It was just so I wouldn't shake, you know. And so, you know, the thing that I was after, you know, was soon lost. And you know, some of my work suffered at that time, because I did this comic book for, or this comic book story for Monty Beauchamp, who did Blab, and then it was later reproduced in Muzzlers, Guzzlers, and Good Yeggs by Fantagraphics, a collection of all my, my graphic work. But the final days of Paul John Knowles, I did coming off of heroin, and my hand was not steady. I mean, I think the work is still interesting, but it's not, you know, I was starting to lose, you know, my hand-eye coordination, and that scared me, you know. And you know, I mentioned Nancy before, and Nancy and I went on the methadone program, and I wanted to get off of heroin, and so, you know, I was starting to reduce my dosage slowly, and I had all the good intentions of getting clean, and I showed at the clinic, you know, because I was on the methadone program, and so they had to test my urine every day, and all of a sudden, you know, they say that my urine is dirty, you know, and I knew I hadn't been using, so I was really angry, and I started yelling at them, and, you know, screaming, and then I finally walk out. And then my wife at the time, Nancy, said, "I've been putting it in your coffee." I said, holy shit. And that was the end of that. You know, it was a 10-year relationship, you know, but that was the end. And I had to spend 5 years totally sober. I drink wine these days. So I'm not clean. I can't say that I'm totally clean. But I haven't used heroin, you know, for many, many years. And I don't know. I try to be honest with, you know, whatever's out there. And so thank you for the question. And it did affect my work, and everything does affect the work. And you know, but I don't think, like some people think sometimes that acid was important to me, but I did do acid, but I think ayahuasca was more important to me than acid. Those trips that I did in Oaxaca gave me more insight than I was doing, like Purple Haze back, you know, and Orange Sunshine back in the old days, and that wasn't as profound. I've never done ayahuasca, but maybe ayahuasca's close to that. I don't know, but I mean, I'm an old man. I'm almost, I'm almost 70, and I can't believe I'm still here with all the kind of shit that I did. I don't really deserve to be here, but because so many of my friends that I love, they're gone, but I'm here, and so yeah, ask me whatever you want. I'll try to help. Although I'm the worst example. Whatever you do, don't follow Joe.
Anybody else?
Hi, could you talk about your friendship with Sammy Town?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Sammy McBride. He is also family. He's a really dear family member. I met him when he was only 16 years old in the band Fang, and he and I shared a needle. I'm talking about literally. Yeah, we both used the same needle. We shot up together, and he and I just got each other. I think I signed my copy of Mystery of Wolverine Woolbait that you were talking about earlier to Sammy in my blood, and he and I were very close friends, and he had this really dark time. He murdered his girlfriend, and he was a drug dealer, and was out of his mind, and he went to prison and had to pay for his crimes, and but he paid for those crimes, and he's out and he's doing better than ever, and he's one of the most loyal and trustworthy friends that I know. There's only a few people that I can actually say that about, but Sammy is really trustworthy, and I told him when he got out of prison that I would take his back for anyone except the family of his girlfriend that he killed. And I said, "Do you understand that?" He said, "Yeah, I understand that, and I probably would do the same thing." I love him. He's a dear brother. I'm proud of him because he did turn his life around. Special man. He's still doing great stuff. He's in Europe right now. Otherwise, he'd probably be here tonight. But yeah, Sammy Town is what he goes by. But his Sammy McBride, when I first met him, he had this. He had a shaved head with this unicorn-like horn at the top of his head. He was only 16 years old, and if anything, I felt a little bit guilty, maybe because I was shooting up with him. But I'm really proud of him, and I hit him out from the cops back in that day, and I'm not sure it was the right thing or the wrong thing to do, but I did it, because I loved him, and I still do. So yeah, Sammy.
Tony Bonnie, you had a question.
Adam, part 3, and apocalypse culture, and you're walking down the street, and how did you become involved with that direction?
Well, Adam and I, you're talking about a lot of, they're all very important family members to me. Adam, I knew Adam before Apocalypse Culture and before he actually did any publishing at all, and I met him when his father, Woodrow Parfrey, or what was better known by the Hollywood types, was Woody Parfrey. He was like the poor man's Elijah Cook, where he would get shot 20 minutes into the film. And got shoved into shit by Clint Eastwood in The Outlaw Josie Wales, and it was a little bit hard for Adam to grow up, with that father, but he loved him, and I loved him too, because I thought he was one of the great character actors, that, in these, great old, movies and TV shows. And I met Adam at around the time his father died, where he got the flag, because his father was, was in a prison camp during, the World War II. He fought Nazis, and my father also was involved in World War II, but he fought in Iwo Jima and Guadalcanal. So, but there was a connection there, and but he and I used to talk for hours about obscure books and and art, and film. And when Adam published his first book, this is before Apocalypse Culture. It's a book called Michael, which is a novel by Goebbels, the Nazi. And Adam Parfrey asked me to talk to Joachim Nurashel, who was a very famous Jewish translator, who was a collector of my paintings, about doing the translation. And I talked to Joachim, and Joachim, who was a really dear friend of mine, he had a lot of my early work. He died more recently. Well, he was a lot older than me anyway, but he had, at that time, maybe the most amount of my early work. And Joachim decided to do the translation of this Goebbels novel. And that was before Apocalypse Culture. That was Adam's very first book. Then when Apocalypse Culture was being made, Adam asked if he could use one of my earlier paintings, because I didn't do that painting that's the cover of Apocalypse Culture for the book. It was an existing painting. Adam just asked if he could use it for the cover, and I said yeah, because I saw what what an amazing book Apocalypse Culture was. And Adam, I gave Adam away to Jody in their wedding. I mean, you're talking about all these people that you're talking about are family, because to me, the family is all important, but it's not the blood family. It's not the people that share your blood, because I have, a brother that I don't consider family like I do Adam or Sammy or Jonathan Shaw. So that, to me, there's these people that you take on in your life that are the people that you care about, and that you love and that you protect. Because I don't give a fuck about USA, or the planet. I care about my family, and my family is, these people that touch me, and that I can depend on, and they depend on me, and I can trust. So I hope that answers it a little bit. Yeah, there's one right there.
So I ran La Luz de Jesus for years.
Yeah.
And, but
You look familiar.
Yeah. In all that time, I never got the story of how you met Billy.
Billy Shire.
Yeah, Billy Shire. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to remember that myself.
My first day was, they were closing the show, you were doing the performance at Venice Beach on the pier that
Yeah,
time.
yeah, that I was talking about.
And I had seen you I didn't see it happen. I saw the immediate aftermath of the MFA show in Boston, and I had come across
And the
it.
LA Weekly wrote about it.
Yeah, this is before the internet.
Yeah.
And so I had moved from Boston to LA in that time frame, and walked in, and Michelle Gordon, who was working there at the time, let me go behind the curtain. The paintings were on the ground, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm looking at all these Joe Coleman pieces in the same room. And she's like, oh, you know who he is? And yeah, are you going to the thing tonight? And I'm like, what thing? And hopped on a bus and went down there and waited for everybody. And then I recognized Robert Williams, and I was hanging with him and Suzanne and saw that, and then realized, oh, it's a metal plate. The cookie sheet.
Yeah.
But that's what you didn't get arrested for. But
Well, yeah, because the cops couldn't find me.
yeah. But I never got the story of how you met Billy.
You know, I'm trying to think of that myself. You know, I did this show at Psychedelic Solution first, which was in New York City. Do you guys know Psychedelic Solution? Yeah, and Jacaber, you know, was the first one to put this big one-man show. Although it had one like that in the Lower East Side at Chronicide before that, but this was more of a giant public thing, because Psychedelic Solution was doing these, you know, major events that would have, you know, so many people showing up, and you know, it was groundbreaking for me to be exposed to so many people. And I think that Billy Shire either reached out to me around that time, but I'm not sure how we actually got to know each other. But yeah, Billy Shire then put on a similar show at at the Soul Plant, or La Luz. Yeah. I mean, but it was back when it was on Melrose. I mean, that was cool when it was, you know, back there in a real old soap plant. Yeah. No, I love I did a couple of shows with Billy, and yeah. I mean, that's where I really got exposed to the West Coast, because I was more of an East Coast artist, but I had a lot in common with a lot of things that were going on in the West Coast. So it was nice. I mean, Billy's the one that actually made that happen. Because previous to that, I did not have any kind of West Coast connection at all. But I can't remember I mean, I wish Billy was here. I'll see him when I'm in LA later, next week. And I'll ask him, because I don't remember.
Anybody else?
Well, I wanted to ask something about your process. And looking at your work, I ask myself, when do you know that your painting is complete?
I do think that I did address this before, but maybe it wasn't clear. You know, I paint without any sketching, you know, and I complete a square inch at a time. You know, and I devote 8 hours a day to this square inch without knowing, you know, what the whole image looks like. But as time goes by, it unravels. I mean, I say unravels, but really it's kind of growing, because I'm adding like jigsaw puzzle pieces slowly, but sometimes I'll jump to the other side of the painting. But eventually, the only way that I know that I'm finished is when I simply run out of room. And then I make frames. And I mean, the frames I make are also like fetish objects that house, you know, actually physical presence, DNA of the subject that I'm painting. So it doesn't really end when I when I finish the painted part. Then the frame is really important. A lot of the frames are painted too, but a lot of them have these fetish objects that try to embody, you know, the essence or soul of the narrative, because that's really important to me.
Thank you.
I've got a quick question kind of
Yeah.
off of that. How many times have you gone back and made corrections in paintings? Because I know I read about with the Cantrell's Raiders,
Yeah.
you found the picture later on of the person and you went back and sanded it and replaced that. Is that, I'm assuming that's very few and far between.
Yeah, I mean, that's really rare that I go back and change anything, because once I've committed, you know, that square inch, it's pretty much over. But in the case of Quantrill's Raiders, I discovered, you know, an image of one of the Raiders that I'd never seen before. And I'm still working on it, so I'm still in the process. And I did go back, and I realized that the likeness was a little bit off. So I did change the face of one of the Raiders in order to be closer to what I wanted to portray. And I mean, maybe it's happened a few times since. I mean, that's the one that sticks in my head, and that's why I've talked about that one. But usually, even if I find contradictory information, I still think that sometimes the mythology around something is more important than the truth, or the so-called truth, because the truth is so fragile. I mean, it's like water. How do you hold on to it? You know, and there's so much, you know, this whole idea of disinformation has become a giant problem now. But what I'm after is the essence, you know, and I try to be true to the essence. And part of the essence is in the mythology around the subject that I'm painting as well. So I want to be true to the essence, most importantly. But rarely do I ever change any of those very precious little details I put in, and only if I'm still in the middle of painting. I would never go back to a painting I've already done and add anything. I know some artists have done that, but no, I wouldn't.
All right. I want to thank Patrick, Brandon for making this happen. We couldn't have done it without Whitney and Joe. Thank you all for coming out. This has been huge. We'll be doing the book signs. Jacob, Junior, we're so glad you're here to help out. Thanks for